Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Invitational II Open Qualifiers. My name is Jaggerous, and I'm joined, as always, on the casting desk by Spyro. How you doing, Spyro?
Hey Jagger, so I'm looking forward to today. I got some exciting games coming up. This is going to be the final leg of the Swiss stages, and this is going to allow 16 players to join the main invitational group later on this month, which is going to consist of 128 players competing for that crown of the TLG Invitational #2 champion. And we're going to see who takes that one. But first, for today, though, we got to get through the final legs and see who is going to end up taking those spots.
Yep, so yesterday we had the first 4 rounds of the community qualifier, which hopefully will have separated the wheat from the chaff, the scrubs from the gods. So, anyone who's particularly bad at Gwent will hopefully have lost at this point, unless they lucked out, which means that we should see some relatively close, hopefully, matchups. Worth noting that this stream is on a 5-minute delay. So if anything is broken, we will find out in 5 minutes' time, and hopefully everything will be fine.
Hopefully, the audio issues will have cleared up now. Hopefully, everyone can hear us. But yeah, we got some exciting games. The first one, I believe, we got one more time, a little bit of a Daft Punk nod there, and then I believe the other one being Cykliptus. Those are good. I believe that both these players are 4-0 so far in this tournament, so they've been performing quite well, respectively, for the first stage of the Swiss tournament.
Yep, and we can have a little peek inside the deck list, starting off initially with One More Time, who is bringing Blaze of Glory, Lined Pockets, and Uprising.
Yeah, Blaze of Glory. Warrior Skellige, once again, making its appearance in the meta. It's a list that has seen itself pop up time and time again in the past. And this time around, though, one very big change, or addition, should I say, to Skellige, and that is Ice. And Ice being a card that allowing you to, if you have Bloodthirst, to discard a card, resurrect that card instantly, and then combine it with your lead ability on the same turn to do that damage, and then also resurrect that card you discard your lead ability, which can play for up to 39 points in one turn, making an absolutely insane finisher for this deck. And it's a warrior too, so you can choose it with Blood Eagle. Very, very strong addition to Skellige Warriors, I would say.
Oh, it's a massive amount of points. And at 11 provisions, it's a super good value play. And it's something you can just jam whenever, to get those points. But bear in mind, with your Blaze of Glory damage, sometimes you may lose out a little bit on the damage because you have to play it with Ice in a specific way. So there is a slight downside. I don't think it's really much of a downside, but there's a minor downside if you're wanting to use Blaze of Glory for very specific removal on a key target.
Yeah, it sometimes can be awkward, but most time it's okay. And then moving on to Line Pockets. This is going to be a bit of a different deck than we're used to. Syndicate now getting Crime Syndicate coming back to the menu, which I believe this deck actually one of the strongest decks since the latest patch. And it is a very, very interesting deck, I would say, with all the flexibility that it has going for it.
Yeah, it is a spicy list, and Syndicate really was out of favor previously, before we had our new cards, because it just didn't seem to add up or line up with the other decks out there, the kind of point slam list, the more control heavy list. Syndicate just kind of struggled, but now they have so many more options for control compared to previously when it was just, Philippa and Poisons, that they can really go toe to toe, and they can help to shut down some of the more engine focused lists.
Yeah, it's definitely got some crazy new cards with regards to the likes of Cleaver, which allows you to basically get this as a... It's also another nice spender. I must say, Syndicate now has some really good spenders. You have Cleaver, which can spend 4 coins to gain 5 points, which is a very nice way to spend your coins. Also, it doesn't go very tall, because you can spend your coins, instead of going tall, you go wide, which is actually quite valuable if you want to play around Tall Punish. And then, of course, with Tunnel Drill having just the mass removal available to you, if you combine with the lead ability, you can convert 2 coins to 3 damage, and that can potentially just decimate your opponent's board in a blink of an eye, making it just such a nice addition to Syndicate. And this deck just has so much going for it. You got some engines, you got some control, you got just pretty much everything you need, and great deck overall, I would say.
And then last but not least, we have our good friends, the Witchers, with cards such as Griffin Witcher, and Griffin Witcher.
Yeah,
Don't try and get me to tell you which is which. There's Griffin Witcher shield, Griffin Witcher damage, and Griffin Witcher card draw. Like that's how I differentiate them. One of them is a mentor, one of them is an adept, but I couldn't tell you who's who.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of Witcher's deck, obviously being a fully Witcher deck. There's two big differences in this deck though since the latest patch. Is now Vesemir has Adrenaline 4 instead of Adrenaline 5, which can make things a little bit awkward to play Vesemir. And then the biggest change I would say is Scythemen. They no longer boost themselves for everything that's boosted on the board, but rather only on the row, which does lower their ceiling a little bit. Overall, though, the deck still functions pretty much the same way, but with a few more nuance to it. I would, and they'll set this. We'll have to see how this still performs in today's standards with the latest patch.
Yeah, I think the changes to the Witcher list were fair. Although bear in mind the Scytheman change does also impact Uprising as Uprising spawns a Scytheman, so it has taken off quite a few points off the top. But if you were winning by say 20 odd points, now you're winning by like 5 points. It's close now, basically, is our conclusion. But let's have a little look and see what Cykliptus has opted to bring with Battle Trance, Deadeye Ambush. So a bit of difference there, but then also Uprising.
Yeah, also Uprising. Interesting to see people still playing so much Uprising, even though Northern Realms not really getting that much new tools. We're actually getting a bit of nerfs as well. But let's start with Battle Trance. Looking at this, it is going to be a Gedoneth deck with the likes of alchemy cards, alchemy synergies. Interesting inclusion of Blue Boy Lugos in this deck. Obviously, Blue Boy Lugos being a fantastic card with the likes of Use Ritual, just because you can get those points on deploy. Whereas with this deck, you're kind of relying a little bit on the priest to actually get that Blue Boy value. Other than that, though, it has a lot of points with regards to Gedoneth. This deck can potentially, just put out a crazy amount of points in a very short amount of time with that Gedoneth. Plays for some carry with Crow Mother and be able to reutilize its cards with the likes of Freya's Blessing. You can play those priests multiple times and keep the pressure going throughout the course of the game.
It's a interesting list. Like it has a lot of point slam, but it can also get shut down if your opponent has enough control to get past your defender, deal with your Draco Turtle, deal with your priests. It kind of completely shuts down the deck. So it's very much an all or nothing sort of list. If you can't do that, they're going to have 1,000,000 points and it's just going to be sad. But if you can get through it, there's a lot of potential to disrupt this list. Then we have our Deadeye Ambush, which is your L's list, with the things like Venosio, with Gezras, Ayla and Feign Death. This is, again, a list that has been around for, I would say, a little while in the current meta.
Yeah, I mean, this Deadeye Ambush deck, there's been a lot of variances in Deadeye Ambush. We've seen elves or just like full-on elf decks. We've seen versions with obviously the movement package, and now we're getting a third version of Deadeye Ambush we've seen a couple of times since the latest patch, and that's Trap Squirtle. Although this time around we're going to be seeing just the traditional movement Squirtle. Looks like Cykliptus is actually going for very traditional lists in that he's not really adapting to the newer lists like line pockets and whatnot. We'll have to see how that works out for me. It's been working out for him so far quite well as to 4-0. It's quite good, but this deck, nothing really too different than what we're used to seeing in the past.
It is worth noting that because the new cards haven't been out for very long, some players will feel more comfortable on the decks that they know, decks that they've piloted consistently for weeks, if not months, compared to piloting something different where you're not maybe 100% sure on the optimal strategy for that list. Sometimes it may be worthwhile to just play something that you're comfortable with because you'll play it at a higher skill ceiling than something new. So that may be the kind of strategy that Cykliptus has opted for here.
And that's a very good point. Is sometimes you can playing decks you're comfortable with can definitely be more beneficial than trying out new decks you're not very sure how to play correctly in a tournament like this, especially when, as you mentioned, a new patch just got released and there's a lot of new things going on. There hasn't been much time for these players to adapt and get used to these new decks. So looks like Cykliptus is, as you mentioned, going for just the tried and true tested methods, as he might feel more comfortable with them, perhaps.
Yep, and this is, I believe, a best of 3. So players do have the option to ban one of these lists and then try and win with 2 of them. So that is the format here for Swiss stage. We're running a best of 3. So you've got 3 lists. One of these will get banned, and it'll be interesting to see how Cykliptus and One More Time opt to go for their ban strategies. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's ban strategies here. It's as I mentioned, this is a new patch. There's new things going on, so it's quite difficult to figure out exactly what is going to be. I would say this much: line pockets, I think, is probably going to be a high priority ban target for Cykliptus, as line pockets just can do pretty much everything. It has removal, it has points, it has kind of everything going for it. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a line pockets ban. And then for one more time. I mean, does he have ways to deal with Battletrons? Does he have heat waves? He does have one heat wave in his deck, in the square, in the line pockets deck. But if he believes his line pockets is going to get banned, he might not be able to answer that. He might not be able to answer that Feign Death, or not that Feign Death, but rather the Geddoneth very easily. Yeah. So could be a Geddoneth ban, could also be a Deadeye Ambush ban. I would expect either Skellige or Squirtle to get banned for Cykliptus.
So what you're saying is we're going to have a lovely mirror of uprising. Who doesn't love mirror matches in tournaments? I mean, I believe that one of them will ban uprising, like purely because they decided that they don't want to play a mirror. They're like, you know what, we're not going to do that to you guys. We're nice. We won't be the person that makes you cast a mirror. We always end up casting a mirror.
But speaking of this, do keep in mind this is going to be best of 3 in the Swiss stages. So as soon as if you win 2 times, you have thus won your set. And this is stage, I believe, 5, right? We're going to stage 5 now, yeah. And we'll see who's going to be able to keep that 4-0 record and who's, or 5-0 record.
4-0, they'll keep the 4-0 record.
Well, I mean, unless wait, can we end in ties this stage? I'm not even sure if we can end in ties.
Oh, let's not think about that. I hate ties. Let's just not have ties. Let's just ban ties to the Shadow Realm. So for now, we are just waiting to get the matches set up for you guys and jump into a game. Basically waiting for the invites to come out, waiting for Gwent tournament broadcasting. Tournament
be very
platform,
soon.
That's the word. Oh, and I've got an invite, so hopefully the players won't take too long in picking their decks.
Okay, so what's the first game we have here? We have Northern Realms, not a mirror. We have Northern Realms versus some Geddoneth Battletrons Skellige, and this matchup I haven't really seen in the past because just as Northern Realms came to popularity, Geddoneth kind of fell off. So we'll have to see how this matchup goes. I would imagine the question becomes who wants to bleed who here, because I believe that Northern Realm still doesn't really want to go into long run. They don't have that much control, and this lock from Margarita won't likely be that valuable in this matchup, as Cykliptus does play the Grimace to Purified, and he surprisingly enough doesn't mulligan away the Grimace, however. So now suddenly Margarita actually looking like it might find some value in round 1 potentially.
I mean, maybe he thinks that Pepega Renaissance, also known as One More Time, I'm assuming that is the same person. Maybe he thinks that Pepega is going to mulligan Margarita. Like, that's the thought process. Well, if they mulligan Margarita, then I don't need Gremist, right? In which case you would change it. Yeah. That's I suppose the logic. But I don't think that
Cykliptus always is a Neuromancer. So if he feels the need to get that Grimace, he can always a Neuromancer for round 1 if he does it. However, he looks at his opening hand. We do see the Crow Mother, which is always nice to have in your opening hand. And down comes this Griffin Witcher added, which is always so difficult to deal with because of that pesky shield. However, I believe Cykliptus does play with a decoction, I believe, which means he will be able to penetrate through this shield, which could help him deal this. He can only deal with one of these, I believe, so he's going to choose wisely when you use that decoction. And he's hovering over. I guess he could take the Ermion if he wants to, but to see if he decides to go for it or not. Otherwise, he could just potentially ignore it, get his own engines down, and then maybe keep that decoction later on for the second Griffin Witcher adept.
Yeah, I think with the first Griffin Witcher, because typically what it transforms is our land, he's not changing value in that situation, right? You're transforming a 4 into a 4. So often you'll see that happen, in which case you can hold off 1 turn on any potential plays.
Yeah, you could actually, you can often wait. However, now we do see does come down that adrenaline, or the 2 more Witch students coming on the board, which allows nice targets for the transformer. Now you see the priest coming down next to the Chromother, which is quite nice, because if the Chromother does end up dying, you can also resurrect it again to say, however, looks like Renaissance having none of that, going to just boiling oil the priest, and Cykliptus is going to decide if he wants to invest that Freya's Blessing to resurrect that priest or not.
Yeah, both players just jamming cards here. This is where casting gets a bit challenging. I think Cykliptus opting to develop his own engines was a mistake when we see how many Griffin Witchers, have multiplied. They're like rabbits, they're just multiplying like crazy. And Cykliptus is then investing the Freya's Blessing just to get their engine back. But they haven't really seen a whole lot of value so far from this priest.
Yeah, the priest, priest gets a lot of value into the survive, and it can actually end up, if it kills the Crow Mother will come back again, of course, and then obviously priest being extremely valuable if you combine with the Draco Turtle. Now, however, we do see the Crow Clan Druid coming on the board and playing for 8 points. And that one, a little bit of a tongue twister. I know how much you love saying that card name.
Yeah, I'm so impressed you got Crow Clan Druid so quickly without stumbling. I'm just like Clown Crow whatever, like. Oh, it's all good. It's all good.
So in terms of removal, Renaissance only really has that on Say Slave. He does have the lock, but if you imagine Grimace will be able to answer that lock, the Merlin, however, coming down here, getting a lot of carryover, and Renaissance trying to win round 1, allowing him to potentially bleed round 2, getting out that Geneth maybe in round 2 here, as he's just going to develop that Griffin Witcher, which is going to have Veil on it with that Crystal Skull. And as we all know, Griffin Witcher with Veil is very scary. Once you get to Adrenaline 3, it can start doing 4 damage or 4 value every turn, which is quite powerful for a 5 provision engine. And Cykliptus now falling a little bit behind on the engine front of things.
With that said, not behind on points, and the damage going into this Crow Mother she can always be resurrected, through playing an alchemy card, so this is damage that you want. With that said, Pepega Renaissance now has 5 adepts. He is adept at playing Witchers, and I don't think Pepega can afford to give up this round because he has such limited control that in a long round he can't do anything about, getting through the Defender, getting through the Draco Turtle. It's just too much.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Renaissance without any hard removal, besides Anseus, he really doesn't have a whole lot of ways to disrupt Cykliptus. And the Cykliptus, I believe, does run a Defender too, I think.
Yep.
He does, in fact. And if he can't get through that Covenant of Steel, he really can't disrupt anything at all. So it could be quite dangerous to go into long round 3 against this deck. So Renaissance desperately want to win round 1, but these adepts, look how much points they've played for. They've transformed so many things, and now we see Vesemir coming on the board with some more carryover. And also we see the Griffin Witchers kicking in, getting 4 points a turn now. Looks like Renaissance might be forcing. Ooh, he actually takes the pass here. Very, very quick gameplay for both these players.
I think with the Veiled damaging Witcher, the Griffin Witcher, you get to that point where you have to just give it up because 3 points of damage per turn is just way too much. So that's one of those situations where you get into a position where there's not a lot you can do. So let's take a quick look at some of the mulligans and see if Pepega manages to draw a hand that he can utilize to potentially bleed out the Skellige player.
Yeah, I would assume that Renaissance really would like to get out that Geneth if at all possible, and we do see that the Geneth has been kept in hand, so it could be awkward for Cykliptus to decide if he wants to commit this Geneth early to defend the bleed, or if he's going to try hold on to it. That's always such a big risk about scenario cards. You have to, sometimes when you get bled, you decide, do you commit it early to defend the bleed, in which you give your opponent a good pass, or do you try hold it for the end and green it up? But if you do that, you could end up with a Geneth finisher, which is not very good for a defense of the bleed. So we'll have to see how he decides to play this out. Let's see what Cykliptus decides to go for. Yeah, he does have the Crow Mother carryover, which can help him defend the bleed potentially. But the Sigdriffer, not very good right now. There's no real good targets developed in the graveyard just yet for that Sigdriffer.
No, because also because the Freya's Blessing was used in round 1, you can't even use a Sigdriffer for something like a priest because it's now been doomed. With that said, he does have the Ermion in hand, so he could go looking for something like the... Oh, he doesn't have a... what's it called? Decoction.
Yeah, he does. He does.
Am I being blind? I'm probably being blind.
Huh.
Oh, it's in hand. It's in hand. I'm talking. Yeah, so you
hand.
can play the Decoction in hand, kill the Radovid's Royal Guard, and resurrect the Crow Mother. So there's tempo available to Cykliptus. Although at the moment, Pepega hasn't played much.
is the Griffin Witcher Adept is now, I believe, in deck boosted up to 6 with a shield. So Decoction won't even be able to kill the Adept any longer. Of course, you can, of course, wait for the subsequent Adepts to transform, which only come to 4. And we do see it does come down Draco Turtle, and this will be great value with that Priest. However, you would expect this Priest to die from a from Unsafe, or even get locked. And again, that Grimace is not in hand for Cykliptus, as he mulliganed away round 1. And now, how is he going to deal with this Keldar? Keldar being such a devastating card if left unchecked, and I don't see how Cykliptus is going to deal with it.
No, the 1 armor and the boost on there, meaning that you can't easily decoction it. And Cykliptus is recognizing that and playing the Gedeneath in answer. I think the Aneromancy onto the Draco Turtle was also to develop his graveyard. You know, he needs Draco Turtle in the graveyard for next round so that his Sigurdriffer has a target.
And Renaissance, not even giving a second thought, going to just push on through, despite the Geneath being developed on the board. Pretty big point gap for Renaissance, as he has to go up against a Geneath and a Dracoturtle, which is quite scary. But now we see the second Crow Clan Preacher coming on the board, which does complete the Bonded, and that is going to catch up quite a bit with Crow Mother coming out from the graveyard as well here.
Yeah, you're just getting huge amounts of tempo from your alchemy cards, as each of them is boosting by 2. With that said, Pepega, you know, is starting to look a bit scary. There's the lock onto the Draco Turtle to deny the Mardrome value on that, and continuing to just push ahead, 42 to 27. Pepega, like at this point, he can almost invest all. In fact, he can, you know, to an extent, invest all of these cards and then just rely on the Witcher trio for a short round.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what Northern Realms does so well, is, you know, you can invest quite a lot in around 2 bleed and still keep a decent amount of cards left, as we see Decoction finally coming down onto that Adept and also boosting up both of these Crow Preachers rather, and that is ending up boosting them by 2 each, so quite good value. Scoreline still within reach for Cykliptus. However, we're going to see Range Throw and Sayas coming out here from Cykliptus. And this is actually quite a smart play from Cykliptus, saying that if you didn't have an answer for my... Actually, there's no heat wave at all, so there actually is no answer. So actually, he knows exactly what he is up against, as this is open deck list, so players do know what they have to play around, what they don't, and obviously with no heat wave for Cykliptus, and Sayas Range Row is uncounterable, really.
Yeah, the greed is just legit. Like, he's identified that he can get another point onto his... You know, if he opts to play the leader ability, he's getting another point onto his Scytheman by stacking that row with boosts. It also gives him the dual effect rather than the damage, so he can opt to try and take out one of these engine targets. And finally, Gedeneath completed, the Priest comes down, and the Draco Turtle with the Mardrome does mean that now 49 points to 47. But does Cykliptus really have many other big tempo plays?
Not really much. He's got leader ability, and this Sigdriffer not really looking too great either. I must say, there was one way that Cykliptus could have countered this Unsaid. He does play with a Runestone, and if he hypothetically found Runestone into like a stunning blow, that could have been quite devastating for Renaissance. However, it looks like he is going to be fine here, as he's going to go full leader ability as well with that Scytheman coming on the board. 10 points still despite the nerfs, and there's the Unsayas. Look at that point gap. I don't know if Cykliptus can get there. That is a lot of points to make up, and if he does even get there, what does he really have left for round 3?
The answer is just not much. I mean, you have your... I guess you have your Sigurdriffer onto your Draco Turtle. If you can preserve your leader charge with the Mardrome, that's a decent amount of points. And I guess that's what you have to try and do here, but actually you're not able to preserve it here. You're going to have to play the Sigurdriffer, see what you get. And it's a sad Sigurdriffer.
Oh, he should have gone Sigurdriffer first onto the Crow, the Crow Preacher. That would have been actually not a bad amount of points. Instead, no, I don't think he could. I think he could have done I think it's a 2-0, but I think he could have maybe gotten. Could he? Maybe, I guess actually, I think it would have actually mattered. He's down by 9 points. Maybe it didn't matter, but. Yeah, looks like Northern Realms doing what Northern Realms does, and you know, you love to see a Jaggerous, a good old 2-0, and that's what we got here.
I absolutely adore a 2-0. 2-0s are my jam. I'm going to very quickly turn my Gwent sounds down a little bit. Temeria is what matters, but so that in the next game, Spyro is nice and clear. If there's any other issues with the audio or anything, chat, do let me know. But we're going to wait for the next invitation to come through, and that does put Pepega, aka one more time, 1 point up, but we still has to win one more time if he wants to.
That's what I was about to say.
Take the
Swiss. He does need to win one more time if he wants to take the series. So this is match point. This is best of 3. So if if Renaissance wins again here, he will take the series. So he will be moving on to his final deck, whereas Cykliptus is going to still need to win with that Gwent deck if he wants to progress. So let's see what happens in game number 2. This could be the match decider, or we might go into a game number 3 potentially. We'll have to see how this one unfolds.
Yeah, but that does mean that Gedeneath not banned and hasn't yet made it through. Witchers did their thing. We're not going to see a Witcher mirror. Thank God for that. Everyone is happy. But we'll have to wait and see what it is one more time has left, whether he has Skellige or whether he has Syndicate, because I don't believe we know the bans.
Yeah, I didn't see the bans either, but we'll have to see. We know that obviously Cykliptus does have Skellige still, so that much is known. I do believe that I would expect Syndicate to honestly get banned. Syndicate is a very scary deck right now, and I would probably be banning Syndicate if I was there. Syndicate definitely just such a scary faction with Philippa. Like they have so many answers. You know, if they have an engine, if you play an engine, they can fill up it. Or if you play a couple of engines, they can play drill and just mass murder your engines. There's just so many ways of disrupting your cards. And whilst at the same time, they also have so much value of their own too. It's just a very scary faction right now, I think.
I think both of those decks are quite scary. You know, the iced Skellige list is pretty devastating as well. And when you think about the lists that Cykliptus is bringing, the Gedeneath, the Witchers, and the Scoia'tael, you know, how do you feel that they'll do against Skellige if that's what's still available?
Scoia'tael might be tricky because I know in the part, you know, you got so many when you're playing this version of Scoia'tael, so many engines. Skellige really loves engines because you can just end up, you know, killing engines. That's what Skellige does well. Is it has removal, it can kill engines, and that's great. And then on top of that, now this Skellige deck also has a pretty insane finisher as well. On top of that, so I would have to give it to Skellige, I think, if that matchup were to occur. Warrior Skellige versus Movement Scoia'tael, honestly. With the new addition of Ice, I think Skellige now takes the edge in that matchup.
Yeah, so just waiting on the match starting, hopefully everything behaving itself this time around. Usually with the tournament, it just sends you another invite. I'm just sitting here watching a card spin, you know, hoping for Gwent gameplay, maybe sometime soon. But players, they do have time to, you know, take a quick break between matches, grab a drink, decide on the decks that they want to play, rope, and all that. And I believe actually they are taking a quick break. I've just heard in my ear, and by in my ear I mean on Discord. So we'll get into a game, hopefully very soon. Oh, here he goes. See? I blessed it. Yeah. I blessed the game.
Alright, looks like we're going to see some Skellige action versus Northern Realms. And this matchup in the past, I would say, I would have had to hand it to Skellige now. And with the likes of Ice on top of everything, I think Skellige should take the edge of this one. But we'll have to see what ends up happening. We have one deck on the one hand that got stronger. We have one other deck on the other hand that got a bit weaker. So curious to see how that ends up performing nowadays. But if Cykliptus can get a good bleed in round 2 potentially, could maybe force out that Ice, and that could be quite devastating for Renaissance if that were to happen.
Okay, so this time around, players swapped around. So Cykliptus down here at the bottom of your screen, the blue coin player, versus, one more time, Pepega Renaissance. You know what? I'm just calling him Pepega. Screw it. Versus Pepega, and we'll see whether the plays that he makes this game are Pepega, or whether they are in fact Poggers.
Yeah, we'll have to see if he's maybe he's trying to bait his opponent with his name. Just make his opponent lower his guard and then surprise him. I mean, we did see Pepega Renaissance, not so Pepega in the first game. He did take the early lead. As we now see, down comes the Raider, and that can potentially threaten to kill off one of these adepts. That's the one thing that's so nice about Skellige, is they have so many sources of pings and damage. You can kind of mix and match the damage, set up some removal, and now we might see this next adept get killed by that ping plus a gutting slash potentially.
Yeah, it seems that not all Griffin Witcher adepts are equally as adept. We saw so many of them in the first round of the last game, but it's unlikely that we'll see them when you have, a couple points in ping damage. You've also got things like the gutting slash, just to kind of whittle down a Witcher and take off his head. And this is where, if Skellige can put together the right damage numbers, they can be very, very control-y, but they have to have the right numbers adding up, right? That's kind of how this works out.
Yeah, and now we see it does come the second at Griffin Witcher adept, and now Renaissance could end up pinging that and killing off with a gutting slash if he wants to. These adepts are very annoying for Skellige to deal with sometimes, because if you don't actually have damage set up on the board, order damage, it can actually be quite a nuisance to deal with these shields, as we now do see that gutting slash will be combined there and finally put an end to this adept. So let's see now what Cykliptus has to say about that. He doesn't have a Griffin Witcher in hand, and he's going to go play for Assault here, pulling out perhaps maybe a Griffin Witcher.
Yeah.
But if he does end up boosting this up, it goes quite tall. That being said, though, one thing that Skellige has lost is Morkvarg is no longer a warrior. So a lot of these lists has opted to cut Morkvarg. So there isn't really a punish for Cykliptus to TA this up.
Yeah, I think Morkvarg, he's been going to his psychiatrist, they've been having a chat. He's realized that life isn't quite as bad as he thought. He is no longer a warrior. He ain't worried, but it does mean that if you go tall like this, there's not a lot you can do. And Cykliptus telegraphed that he was going to try and play the Griffin Witcher because he held the skull. He held his stratagem when he could have played it to protect a Griffin Witcher adept, which basically says, I'm going to play Griffin Witcher. And this is the optimal strategy because that veil means that it doesn't lock itself. So at 3 cards, at Adrenaline 3, you're doing 3 damage per turn, which is basically like a little tunnel drill.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually more than 3. It's 1 damage and then 3 round damage. So yeah, kind of like a tunnel drill. Not quite as targeted, but still pretty good. And we have to see now Cykliptus actually opting, or rather it's not Cykliptus rather, but we see Renaissance opting to take the pass. And I actually think I like that, actually, passing early. So the thing about Skellige is you got to decide. You either want to pass early and defend a long round 2, but you don't want to be in a situation where you contest round 1 very deep against Northern Realms and then go into a short round 2 where they are still able to beat you, because that's when things get very, very scary. So recognizing that you can't win round 1 and rather taking the pass, trying to recuperate round 2 and defend a longer round 2 bleed makes, I think, perfect sense for Renaissance here.
Yeah, you often see players investing too much into round 1. They kind of get tunnel vision of, I need to win round 1. You know, I need to win round 1 so I don't get bled. I need to win round 1 so I don't get bled. I need to win round 1 so I don't get bled. Not realizing that actually at some point, you know, it's going to get to the point where you've invested so much into round 1 and you lose that you're just wasting your resources. Whereas if you can hold them and use them to defend a bleed instead, it means that, well, you're not going to get bled because you can defend it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's much easier to defend a bleed in a longer round 2 against Northern Realms than a short round 2, because as we know, Northern Realms has a pretty devastating round 2 bleed potential. However, Cykliptus hasn't been able to establish any carryover going into this round 2. So he's got to play a little bit slow to start with, and then only can he start ramping up. So Renaissance, if he plays his cards right, could in theory get a card up here going into round 3. And if you can keep that ice for round 3 and also a card up, that's extremely threatening. So let's see what Cykliptus can do here, as he really wants to bleed out that ice potentially.
But how much do you have to commit to get ice? You know, ice is such a huge swing. And bear in mind, if Pepega Renaissance does play iced, he doesn't have to commit his leader with it, right? You have that option of you can just play it and discard 1 card and resurrect something. Like, you don't have to go all in with iced. So even if you get iced out, he can potentially just save his leader, and you have to spend a lot to get there.
Yeah, it's also quite difficult because of the fact that you need to get Bloodthirst too sometimes, and that can be a little bit awkward against a deck like this that can boost up so many different things. But however, we do see double Brockfar Hunter on the board here, and that is something that Cykliptus I don't think wants to let survive. So might see an Anseus or something come down soon to deal with that, because double Hunter is quite scary, I would say.
I like you say something come down to deal with that. That's the only option he has to deal with it, right? Is the Unsays. Like, Witchers as a list has very, very limited control. You can basically pick one thing. Choose one thing, and that is the one thing you will control. is more or less how this list goes down. And it may be that instead of controlling these, he opts to try and outpoint them and utilize these shields, right? Because a Griffin Witcher Adept can transform a Griffin Witcher Adept into a Griffin Witcher Adept. It makes no sense. Let's be real. It makes 100% 0 sense, but you can reapply that shield by using the charges. So you could use that to try and defend some of this damage. And also, Pepega doesn't want to put damage into something to the point where it can then get transformed and regain the points of damage. So in some ways, as long as Cykliptus can keep these Griffin Witcher Adepts on the board, I don't think he necessarily needs to spend his one method of removal and demand satisfaction.
Yeah, I mean, he does have other removals still left in deck with the likes of the Margarita and the Boiling Oil. But
And
now we're going to
how does
see
he
down
access
comes an
those?
Encrypt. Yeah, I mean, obviously he can't do it right. He can't do it right now, but I'm just saying for later. However, that being said, now there is a lot of engines on Renaissance's side of the board, so it is going to be quite scary for him to deal with. I mean, this Unsays now can't even deal with this boat because you have to invest 2 lead charge into Unsays. It's going to come down on the board at 3 strength because of that ping. So this is quite scary for Cykliptus to deal with, and this could be his last pass theoretically. So he's got to decide what he wants to do. I mean, he still wants to get that Vesemir carryover, but he also doesn't want to go a card down either.
I mean, if you end round 2 on 6 cards, is that really a lead? Like, I'm not convinced. And actually, he's opting to spend those leader charges to deal with the boat, sink the ship. The ship has been satisfied. Amsays is on the board, but you spent 2 leader charges to do it, which is a lot. With that said, this bleeding not such a problem, provided you've got the transform in pocket. Keldar, he can in fact become, or Erland, making up names again. Erland can in fact become a Griffin Witcher adept if he really wishes.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the nice things about these adepts you mentioned. They can just pretty much mitigate so much damage and from just transforming other damage units, making it quite difficult to actually get value from your damage cards if these adepts are stuck on the board, which looks for the time being they are going to be on the board. However, Cykliptus now does have to be careful. Card advantage is something that Renaissance is going to be able to threaten very soon, as Vesemir isn't exactly the highest tempo play to make either. With 2 engines still on the board for Renaissance, it's going to be a little bit dicey to keep going here, as Cykliptus could maybe play Keldar first, but would also like to maybe play Keldar in a more friendly environment, I guess you could say, waiting for the cooldown to first finish on those hunters first.
And here comes a Purify on the shield. So utilizing Grimace to just remove that shield and start to ping out the damage. And putting the damage on the Griffin Witcher that has the ability, right? The one who is the Transformer. He's basically Optimus Prime, but now he's dead. That happens a lot, actually. I'm pretty sure Optimus Prime has died like 15 times. So this is basically canon at this point. But using that Grimace to disable the Griffin Witchers. But with that said, Cykliptus is still ahead in points. So still has the option to pass and not lose his card.
Yeah, I mean, this is... I really think this is probably going to be one of the last... He has to go decide if he wants to go all in or if he wants to pass. It looks like he wants to keep going and commits the Keldar. Now, there is Bloodthirst on the board, which means the lock from Jenga will be able to deal with this Keldar, which is quite nice. And Jenga just being such a nice, clean way to deal with Keldar at times. As Keldar can be quite a nuisance if you don't actually run hard removal. And now this really... I'm not sure what Pepega Renaissance is going to be able to do here, or Cyclops is going to be able to do here, other than commit quite heavily. He has to go like all in, or he has to pass here. But that being said, though, Renaissance still has to decide if he is going to be able to get out of this round with keeping that. Does he play Turkey or not? Oh, he does play Turkey. This is the best target. This is a great target for Turkey, but he needs to. He does have a death blow as well on the Erland, so he could maybe play Blood Eagle and get that Turkey out, because Turkey isn't getting any better than this on this Bareng with 9 base strength.
If you play Turkey to get the if you play the Blood Eagle to get the Turkey, you're not getting iced though. So that is
I mean, if you do that, you don't have to worry about icing it, because there's no iced in hand regardless of that point.
And then you get scared of being too old. That's the fear as well. Like,
I mean, that
Witchers,
is also...
this many Witchers on the board, you know that things like Leo exist, you know that there's still Witcher Trio. I don't think you can afford to go Turkey necessarily. And if you look at Pepega's hand, it's not amazing. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad hand, but when you compare it to what Witcher NR has left, when you have that Quen that threatens a Witcher Trio and leader ability, and also Leo, Cykliptus could maybe go for an all-in. It doesn't seem that crazy anymore, as he has so many points available to him if he does go for it. He's got to decide if he wants to do it or not, and then I guess that's why Renaissance is holding on to that Blood Eagle still. He wants to see if he can go for the Turkey, or does he need to go all-in with the with that ice potentially. And now we're going to see Cykliptus going to decide here if he wants to go all in. I think this is the turn he has to make the decision, and he's going to go for it. It seems he's going to go play the Quen here, and that's probably going to be grabbing out the Witcher Trio. There it is, going to go all in, and that is going to play for so many points, especially with Leo and leader ability being threatened next turn
Yeah,
potentially.
this one is for all of the marbles, and I think when you're Pepega, you see that, you know that they have nothing left in the tank. Like, they're trying to reverse the 2-0, you know. Cykliptus got 2-0'd, now Cykliptus is like, hold my beer, here I come. But, with that said, Vabjorn on the board, with the Blood Eagle, you've got your 2 damage units, you've got your Bloodthirst 2, you've got the Deathblow should you need it, and it's iced baby.
Here it comes. Here's the big swing is gonna come down here. Iced with likely lead ability from Renaissance, and you know NR has some big swings, but now Skellige has some big swings of their own. I mean, Skellige basically saying anything you could do, I can do now, and even better. As we see, down comes that greatsword with the ice, fighting it off the top deck. Very lucky top deck there, going straight into great. So now we're going to see leader ability getting another greatsword coming out here. Look at that point swing. Suddenly the tables have just completely flipped. Holy moly, that is just so many points that Skellige has with that iced.
And what is, I mean, look at Cykliptus's cards. You know, what does he have left? He has a pile of bronzes, and he's just going all in here. He's ahead by 7 and 2 cards down. So
yeah, this this bear, which you can quite happily do it. And I don't even think he needs to even click the heal value. So he's going to be able to keep the totem card up and still has the Herald the Cripple for round 3. This 2-0, unfortunately, not so easy to 2-0 Skellige anymore when they have cards like Ice, which is kind of like a get out of jail free card whenever you need it, as we see here. So, card up. Herald the Cripple still is going to be an uphill struggle here now for Cykliptus.
Yeah, especially when you look at the hand state, you know, you've still got the totem card up, you've still got Soil Blood Totem and the Fanatics in pocket, you've got the Blood Eagle, so you've got whatever warrior you really want, you've got Harold the Cripple, and what does Cykliptus have? He has a Royal Guard, a Griffin Witcher, and a Griffin Witcher. So, you know, I'm not saying this game is over, but actually, you know what, I am saying this game is over.
Yeah, unfortunately, not even an assault to help out in round number 3 here. As we now see that Scytheman going to be pretty big, but I just don't think it's going to be enough. A card down. Here comes the Herald the Cripple to just look at these points that Skellige having now, and yeah, it's just looking painful for Cykliptus. And I mean, Ice, just this I think is a testament to how good Ice actually is nowadays.
Full service.
I was gonna say, actually, Pepega, he shouldn't have clicked the totem there. Because of the random damage from the Griffin Witcher, that random damage could have potentially gone onto a
That Griffin
Fanatic.
Witcher should have gone Ranger as well, because Ranger means the Scytheman gets extra points.
Gets extra points. I mean, it doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, at this point it doesn't matter yet. But yeah, looks like Pepega Renaissance, not actually so Pepega, takes the clean 2-0 victory, it seems, and will advance 5-0 into the next stage of this tournament. So far undefeated and remaining undefeated at this
Winning
stage.
one more time / Pepega Renaissance, because apparently everyone has 2 names these days in Gwent. Nobody has 1 name in Gwent anymore, don't be silly. Why be Gravesh when you can be Headbutt
Play.
something? But that is the first series, the first set of games for round 5.